Remember when six heroes stood back to back and ruined Manhattan and nothing felt impossible? Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson. None of it was guaranteed. The script was thrown out entirely. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about the Avengers. Number 20. Here is something that completely reframes the villain. Tom Hiddleston never auditioned for Loki, not once. For 3 full months, he was auditioning exclusively for Thor, gaining 20 pounds of muscle, wearing a blonde wig, and performing screen tests swinging a replica Mjolnir. Director Kenneth Branagh personally invited Hiddleston based on their prior collaboration on the BBC series Wallander and the stage production Ivanov. The open casting call specified actors over 6 feet tall with blonde hair, and Hiddleston was genuinely going for it. When Branagh ultimately chose Chris Hemsworth for Thor, he recognized something irreplaceable in Hiddleston's auditions, a psychological mischievousness that translated almost perfectly to a completely different character. Branagh told Entertainment Weekly, "He's got a mischievous sense of humor, so does Loki. It felt like he had a star personality, but he was a team player." Joss Whedon was initially skeptical. He openly questioned whether Hiddleston was physically imposing enough to threaten 4 major action stars. He later admitted the casting solved itself. The ace in the hole is Tom Hiddleston, because he's so compelling and commanding that it became, oh, it's about how he gets in their heads. Think about that the next time you watch Loki work a room. Every scene where he wins through manipulation rather than physical force reflects the reason he was cast: psychological intensity over physical presence, and Hiddleston was not the only element that turned out completely different from what it first appeared. Number 19. Those Manhattan streets you have been watching for over a decade are not Manhattan. The Chitauri pouring through the portal, the Avengers fighting through city blocks in one of the most iconic urban battle sequences in superhero cinema. All of it was shot on East 9th Street and Euclid Avenue in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. The Stuttgart Gala, where Loki forces a crowd to kneel, was filmed at Cleveland's Public Square and the Cuyahoga County Courthouse. Here is why Cleveland won the job. Michigan had eliminated its film tax incentive. Ohio stepped in with a 30% refundable tax credit, and that became the deciding financial factor. The production shut down major downtown streets for 4 consecutive weeks in August 2011, creating over 500 local jobs. Army Reserve soldiers from the 391st Military Police Battalion served as background extras and provided on-set corrections for military tactics and uniforms. Co-producer Jeremy Latcham explained it simply. "Cleveland has been amazing. We wanted a real street feeling to the scenes, and we got that. The city's lower traffic density made shutting down entire blocks achievable in a way that actual Manhattan never could have been." An explosion filmed on August 15, 2011 reportedly shook buildings across downtown. The production also constructed a mock-up of East 9th Street at a Chevrolet plant in Parma, Ohio, for sequences requiring fire and detonations. Look for the glass-domed Cleveland Trust Company building in shots where Captain America rescues civilians. The Manhattan geography is entirely invented. Number 18. In 2002, Marvel Comics redesigned Nick Fury in the Ultimate Comics line to physically resemble Samuel L. Jackson. Without his knowledge, without his permission, Jackson discovered his own face looking back at him from a comic book while browsing Golden Apple Comics in Los Angeles. Most people in that situation would call a lawyer immediately. Jackson saw an opportunity instead. When Kevin Feige offered him the role for the post-credits scene in Iron Man, the deal came with an unprecedented 9-picture contract. Jackson recalled the moment. "When Kevin said, 'We're gonna offer you a 9-picture deal,' I thought, how long I gotta stay alive to make 9 movies. He was genuinely surprised by how fast Marvel consumed the arrangement. "I didn't know they were going to make 9 movies in like 2.5 years. It's kinda crazy." He told Rolling Stone his primary concern throughout became trying to keep them from killing me more than anything else. The 9-film contract was fulfilled with Captain Marvel in 2019. Jackson continued beyond it, into Endgame and Secret Invasion. His presence across the early MCU was not decorative. It provided the narrative connective tissue that made the crossover concept credible before audiences understood what a shared cinematic universe was. Every Fury appearance, from brief cameos to full supporting roles, was a calculated position within an architecture drawn up before a single Avenger had assembled on screen. Jackson was not the only actor whose path to this film involved complicated history. Number 17. Everybody knows Mark Ruffalo replaced Edward Norton after a very public falling out between Norton and Marvel. What most people do not know is what Incredible Hulk director Louis Leterrier revealed to HuffPost in 2013. Ruffalo had been his original first choice for the 2008 film. Marvel overruled him, insisting Norton was the bigger name. The recasting 4 years later was, in a sense, the original plan finally going through. Norton clashed with Marvel during The Incredible Hulk, rewriting Zack Penn's script without credit and pushing for a longer cut the studio refused to release. Kevin Feige's public statement about the recasting noted it was rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members. Norton's representative called the statement offensive and a purposefully misleading attempt to paint our client in a negative light. It was not a quiet exit. Norton later told the New York Times he had pitched Marvel a 2-film arc, The Origin and then Hulk as the Conscious Dreamer, which the studio initially agreed to and then quietly abandoned. Ruffalo admitted he was extremely nervous stepping in and said Norton had basically bequeathed this part to him after a phone call between the two. The recasting was Marvel's first major public signal that no individual performer was larger than the franchise itself. Ruffalo's banner carries a qualitatively different weight, more internally managed, more exhausted. Number 16. Think back to the music from Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and Thor. Now, try to hum any of it. Most people draw a complete blank. That was the specific problem Joss Whedon was solving when he hired Alan Silvestri to score the Avengers. Silvestri was selected because he was the only one of the 5 Phase 1 composers who had created a grand recurring theme audiences actually retained. The scores for all 4 previous films were competent, but forgettable. Silvestri's Captain America March was the sole exception. Captain America director Joe Johnston personally recommended Silvestri to Marvel. The reasoning was simple. The Avengers needed a theme people would remember. The score was recorded with 80 musicians at Abbey Road Studios in London. Early discussions debated whether each hero needed a distinct leitmotif, but Silvestri and Whedon chose against fragmentation. They focused on a single unifying Avengers theme alongside the reprised Captain America motif and a new Black Widow theme described as having a lonely, plucked quality and an Eastern European flavor. Silvestri described the creative breakthrough. They're not doing anything. They're standing there, which allowed me to move away from the idea of it being an action moment. Instead, it's like watching chemicals swirling together to become something greater than the individual elements. The decision to unify around one theme mirrored Whedon's entire philosophy for this film. The team always mattered more than any single hero. Not every decision on this production resolved that cleanly. Number 15. The Avengers was widely marketed and released in 3D. Millions of people paid premium prices assuming it had been photographed that way from day one. It had not. The production attempted to shoot natively in stereoscopic 3D using RED cameras mounted on an Animatechnica rig. They abandoned the system after exactly 1 day of shooting. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey later revealed how close the production came to a genuine crisis. Samuel L. Jackson and Stellan Skarsgård told the crew they better get their act together or they are out. It really got that serious. Every single lens change on the 3D rig required 45 minutes of recalibration. On a production operating at this scale and pace, that was simply an impossible demand. The film was ultimately post-converted, with the decision formally announced in December 2011. McGarvey admitted he personally absolutely despises 3D, but acknowledged the post-conversion allowed for dynamic depth adjustments that native capture would not have permitted. Whedon had already tested 3D cameras while directing the Thor post-credit scene and carried existing reservations into production. McGarvey, shooting his first ever digital film on the Arri Alexa, chose the unusual 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio, partly to offset conversion requirements, and partly because the taller frame could accommodate the extreme height differences between characters like the Hulk and Black Widow within a single composition. 52% of opening weekend audiences still chose 3D, generating $108 million of the record-breaking $207 million domestic opening. Number 14. The Avengers has a genuinely globe-trotting feel. Calcutta, Stuttgart, Manhattan. It suggests an enormous international production shot across multiple continents on an unlimited budget. Here is the reality. Over 75% of the film was shot at Albuquerque Studios in New Mexico. using 6 of the facility's 8 sound stages. The Calcutta street where Black Widow recruits Bruce Banner was built on a soundstage, using 3 full shipping containers of set dressing imported from India. The forest where Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America fight was filmed on a reservation outside Albuquerque under an active fire ban. Every lightning effect and practical flame had to be replaced digitally in post-production. Weta Digital's Guy Williams confirmed there was a real thought given to not damage any of the land. We didn't hurt any real trees. Prop trees were built 30 to 40 feet tall for destruction sequences. Whedon later acknowledged the location surprised even him. Originally, we were supposed to be in Los Angeles. Then for a short period, we were supposed to be in New York. And then somehow, we ended up in Albuquerque. Dana Arnold, CEO of the facility's parent company, stated, "There is no other purpose-built stage on Earth where the massive sets created by the Marvel team could have been built." Concentrating the production inside one facility contributed to the film finishing within its reported $220 million budget with no documented overruns. Exceptional for a production this size. Number 13. Production designer James Chinlund described the helicarrier bridge as a gathering place for all the heroes, and designated it the very first set to be constructed. The complete helicarrier interior stretched across 2 full sound stages and measured approximately the size of a football field. Construction took close to 5 months before a single actor walked through the door. Tony Stark's Stark Tower penthouse, where the climactic confrontation with Loki occurs, stood more than 3 stories tall on the soundstage. A 3-block recreation of the Park Avenue Viaduct was built entirely surrounded by green screen. 100 feet of the helicarrier's conning tower was erected on an abandoned airport landing strip in Albuquerque specifically for tarmac sequences. Concept artist Nathan Schroeder described the design challenge. The vessel needed to be light enough to fly, but also strong and aggressive. Maintain an identity as a military vessel. The topside design came together quickly. The underside resisted every approach. It needed to have the aesthetic of a nautical hull and yet not appear too heavy to fly. Building practical sets at this scale was a deliberate choice by Whedon. He wanted actors in real physical environments rather than against empty green screen, giving the ensemble genuine spaces to inhabit together. Every corridor chase, control room confrontation, and tense argument on the helicarrier was performed on a continuous practical set. Actors could physically walk from one section to another without leaving the stage. Those massive sets were not the only things reduced during production. Number 12. You know the moment. Bruce Banner wakes on a warehouse floor after falling from the helicarrier. A calm, unfazed security guard looks at this traumatized man and asks simply, "Are you an alien?" It runs approximately 90 seconds in the final film. In Joss Whedon's original draft, that scene was 12 pages long. Whedon described it as Banner falls into a Coen Brothers movie. A long, existential conversation between a traumatized superhero and a stranger with no capacity for surprise. Harry Dean Stanton was cast through an unexpected connection. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey happened to be producing a documentary about Stanton at the time, which gave the production direct access to him. Whedon recalled the casting rationale simply, "I sort of got him stuck in my head, and I was like, who is more accepting than Harry Dean Stanton?" Whedon considered this scene structurally indispensable to Banner's arc. "I needed to get Banner from the horror of what he had done and almost killing Natasha into a place where he was prepared to go back into that state. He needs somebody who will just accept him." The full 12-page version was eventually released on the Blu-ray. The scene is the emotional bridge between Banner's catastrophic loss of control on the helicarrier and his intentional transformation during the Battle of New York. Without it, the "I'm always angry" reveal loses much of its resonance. Stanton passed away in September 2017 at age 91. Number 11. The Avengers has a clean, propulsive narrative structure. Each hero efficiently introduced, conflicts escalating without extended detours. That propulsion costs something real. The film was originally built around a frame narrative featuring Cobie Smulders' Maria Hill being interrogated by the World Security Council after the Battle of New York. This device opened and closed the film. It was removed entirely. Separately, a substantial Captain America subplot showed Steve Rogers genuinely confronting modern life. He learns Peggy Carter is still alive, discovers his wartime friends have died, and meets a waitress played by Ashley Johnson. That entire thread was also cut. Whedon explained the Maria Hill decision. 1. The movie was too long. 2. Audiences didn't respond to it. Most of them didn't know who this character was or what the context was. The rollout to the Avengers getting to Loki was so gradual that people were getting restless. The alternate ending featured Hill using a recording of the World Security Council's nuclear strike order as leverage. Whedon expressed genuine regret about the Captain America material. "I hated cutting it. I hated cutting the Captain America stuff with the waitress." The deleted scenes were released on Blu-ray as Man Out of Time and show a significantly more melancholy Steve Rogers. The waitress was later referenced in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, confirming she remained part of continuity. Alright, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Avengers moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. Number 10. Robert Downey Jr. arrived to the lab scene hungry. Before filming began, he secretly hid bags of food among the props and equipment on set. The crew could never locate his stashes, so they let him continue. The moment where Tony Stark casually offers Bruce Banner blueberries during an intense Tesseract discussion was completely unscripted. Downey simply produced them mid-take and offered them to Mark Ruffalo and Chris Evans while the cameras rolled. That was not the only improvisation that made the final cut. The "that man is playing Galaga" line on the helicarrier bridge was entirely unplanned. Whedon confirmed on the DVD commentary that the joke landed so well they digitally inserted Galaga gameplay graphics onto the background agent's monitor in post-production and added a cutaway shot of the agent returning to his game. The line, "Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?" directed at Thor was similarly improvised, after Whedon provided the Shakespeare in the Park premise as a loose suggestion. Downey's improvisational confidence traced back to Iron Man, where he improvised "I am Iron Man," the single line that anchored the entire franchise. Whedon's DVD commentary credits Downey repeatedly for elevating scenes through unscripted choices. These moments gave Tony Stark the spontaneity essential for grounding a film built around gods, super soldiers, and a green rage monster. The blueberry exchange, the Galaga callout, and the drapes insult. 3 of the most quoted lines in the film. None appear in any draft of the script. Number 9. Jeremy Renner spent 90% of the Avengers under Loki's mind control. Blank, mechanical, a cold antagonist rather than the sharp marksman audiences expected based on his brief appearance in Thor. He was not pleased. He told the LA Times in 2012, "At the end of the day, I'm not the character I signed on to play." His response was theatrical. He began staging fake heart attacks between every single scene. At a London Film and Comic-Con Q&A in 2016, Renner described the campaign, "I just had a heart attack in every scene. I'd just be walking with Scarlett Johansson and just like, ugh." And they said, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "I'm giving you an option if you just want to kick me out of this movie." He also stated plainly, "I was just getting to know who Hawkeye was, and then zap, I'm Loki's minion." Renner felt robbed of the character-building opportunity his co-stars received. Whedon acknowledged the problem in Age of Ultron, writing a self-aware line where Hawkeye says, "I've done the whole mind control thing, not a fan," and substantially expanding the character to include the secret family storyline. The mind control structure was a narrative necessity. It created a human-scale antagonist inside SHIELD and built Black Widow's redemption arc. The trade-off was Renner's character development, and he made certain the filmmakers heard about it every day. Number 8. The single biggest laugh in the Avengers. Hulk grabs Loki mid-monologue and slams him into the floor like a rag doll, then walks away muttering, "Puny God." The entire theater loses it. Here is what that actually looked like from behind the camera. Tom Hiddleston described the physical reality. "I had a piece of wire tied to my ankle, and there was a mat on the floor out of shot, and 3 of the strongest stunt guys holding the wire behind the camera. Between takes, his job was to throw himself into impact trenches, as hard as I can and as high as I can." He said he felt insane and foolish throughout the entire shoot day. An alternate version was later revealed through a Marvel companion app. Loki generates illusion copies of himself to confuse the Hulk, only for the Hulk to identify and smash the real one anyway. The final version, with Loki's monologue cut off mid-sentence, was chosen for maximum tonal surprise. ILM built the Hulk entirely in digital using motion capture, keyframe animation, and rigid body simulation. Hiddleston eventually embraced it. For about 2 years after that, I couldn't go through airports anywhere in the world without somebody going, "Hey, Mr. Loki." I love it when you get Hulk smashed. The scene repositions the Hulk from a mindless threat into a character with comedic timing. The shock on his face just before impact was performed while a wire yanked him off his feet. Number 7. That shot. The camera sweeping in a full circle around all 6 Avengers standing back to back in the ruins of Manhattan. Arguably, the defining image of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it existed before Joss Whedon had formally hired his cinematographer. Seamus McGarvey revealed the story on the Red Carpet Rookies podcast. That was actually the first shot that when I met Joss Whedon in a coffee bar in Hollywood to sit for an interview, he showed it to me with his computer, and he said, "So that's what we're making." Visual development supervisor Ryan Meinerding had painted the original concept art, showing the team back to back, and Whedon used it as his pitch image before production officially began. Iron Man and the Hulk were not physically present during filming. The sequence was captured in an open-air warehouse in New Mexico against green screen with only the human-scale actors. Both CG characters were added by ILM in post-production. The 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio was chosen so the taller frame could accommodate the height difference between characters like the Hulk and Black Widow. Kevin Feige described the moment the shot appeared in the cut. "The moment I realized that this could be an iconic moment, not just for the MCU but for these kinds of films, was on the mix stage. When the effects were final and when Alan Silvestri's amazing score was coming in, I got chills and I realized Joss had pulled it off." Number 6. The mid-credits scene. A large figure in shadow turns slowly toward camera and smiles after hearing that challenging humanity is to court death. 6 years of MCU storytelling, the Infinity Saga, the highest-grossing film ever made at that point. All of it traces here. And Joss Whedon later admitted he introduced the character almost as a lark. Whedon was passionate about Thanos. He told interviewers, "He, for me, is the most powerful and fascinating Marvel villain. He's the great-granddaddy of the badasses, and he's in love with death, and I just think that's so cute." But he admitted to Slate in 2015 that the decision to include Thanos was essentially casual. The figure on screen is not Josh Brolin. Actor Damien Poitier performed the role because he was available, and no formal casting had occurred for future appearances. Thanos is never identified by name in the film. Kevin Feige confirmed his identity publicly after release. When James Gunn inherited Thanos for Guardians of the Galaxy, Whedon joked, "I was like, good luck, you're welcome." He also confessed writing for Thanos proved harder than anticipated. He's really difficult to write for. A throwaway scene featuring an unnamed character played by an immediately replaced actor, introduced on a whim, set in motion the arc that defined the next 6 years of the MCU. There was another kind of power at work involving real money and a pay gap so enormous it changed how the studio compensated its entire cast. Number 5. Tony Stark was at the center of every poster, every trailer, and every marketing campaign for the Avengers. There is a precise financial reason for that, and it goes beyond creative preference. Downey's deal included a base salary of $10 million plus a back-end percentage of worldwide profits. With the film grossing $1.5 billion globally, his total compensation reached approximately $50 million. Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and Jeremy Renner each received roughly $2 to $3 million. Scarlett Johansson was in the low 7 figures. Downey confirmed the disparity in a GQ interview. "Isn't that crazy? They're so pissed. I can't believe it. I'm what's known as a strategic cost." His leverage traced back to the original Iron Man, where he was cast at a $500,000 base with back-end points that compounded with every billion-dollar result. CAA later renegotiated to include revenue participation across all future Iron Man appearances. By the Avengers, his contractual position was fundamentally different from every other performer on the call sheet. According to Deadline reporting, Downey did not simply benefit from the arrangement. Anonymous sources described him actively advocating for his co-stars, calling him the only guy with real power in this situation, who had already sent a message about how colleagues should be treated. He pushed for pay increases for the ensemble in subsequent films. The gap reflected Marvel's deliberate strategy of signing actors at low rates. Downey was the structural exception from the very beginning. Number 4. All 6 Avengers sitting wordlessly in a destroyed shawarma restaurant after the battle, exhausted, barely moving, communicating nothing. One of the most beloved post-credits moments in franchise history. It was not in the film at the world premiere. The premiere was April 11th, 2012 at the El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles. The scene was filmed the following morning, April 12th. In the sequence where Tony Stark falls back through the portal, Downey improvised the line, Have you ever tried shawarma? There's a shawarma joint about 2 blocks from here. I don't know what it is, but I want to try it. It tested so well that Whedon and Kevin Feige scrambled to shoot a payoff before wide release. Chris Evans had already grown a full beard for his concurrent role in Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer. A custom prosthetic jaw was built to conceal the facial hair. That prosthetic is why his hand stays pressed against his chin throughout the scene. Jeremy Renner revealed Evans spent hours in the makeup chair for a scene under 60 seconds, and that the prosthetic prevented him from speaking or eating on camera. The scene was filmed at Ellet Burger, a real Los Angeles restaurant. The original script had Stark simply asking, "What's next?" Downey wanted something different. Whedon wrote 3 pages of alternatives, and the shawarma suggestion was among them. Evans' fixed posture is not a character choice. It is a physical workaround hiding facial hair from a completely different film. Number 3. Steve Rogers is the calm, principled anchor of the Avengers, the moral center holding the team together when everything threatens to fall apart. The man who plays him almost did not take the job. Chris Evans declined the role of Captain America multiple times. He was filming the drama puncture and experiencing genuine anxiety and panic attacks. The original Marvel offer was a 9-film contract, and that commitment left him unable to sleep. After Evans declined the first offer, Kevin Feige persisted. He invited Evans to Marvel Studios and showed him concept art. Evans said no again. Marvel offered the role with no screen test and gave him the weekend to decide. He negotiated from 9 films down to 6. Evans told the THR Awards Chatter podcast, "It started to feel like maybe the thing you're most scared of is exactly what you should do." He consulted a therapist, his family, and critically, Robert Downey Jr., who shared the same agent and reached out personally. Evans described the call as very nice, comforting. His specific fear was direct. If your lifestyle is changed to the point where your anonymity is compromised, it's really not your right to complain anymore. Evans later called it the best decision I've ever made. The irony is that the anxiety he feared, the loss of privacy, and the weight of a franchise became the foundation for his portrayal of a man displaced from everything familiar, learning to trust a team he did not choose. Number 2, everything about how the Avengers feels, the crackling dialogue, the character-driven humor, the emotional architecture that makes 6 people feel real together, came from a page 1 rewrite. The script that existed before Whedon arrived was read exactly once and permanently set aside. Screenwriter Zach Penn completed a full draft by March 2010 after developing the screenplay since June 2007. When Whedon was hired in April 2010, he read Penn's draft once, told Kevin Feige the studio simply did not have anything, and never returned to it. Whedon told Thrillist in 2018, "I started at square one on the script, straight up. I read it one time and I've never seen it since. There was no character connection." He cited a specific stage direction as the problem, and then they all walked towards the camera in slow motion because you have to have that. Yeah. Well, no, you have to earn that. Penn's draft featured Hawkeye rather than Black Widow in the interrogation role. Whedon's early drafts included a second unnamed villain alongside Loki, which Marvel rejected. According to the 2023 book MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, Penn said, "Whedon didn't even want to meet with me." When Penn reached out, Whedon told him, "No, it's not awkward for me. I'm rewriting you." Penn called Whedon a dick and a bad person. The WGA awarded Penn a story by credit, despite Whedon's full rewrite. Every line of dialogue in the theatrical cut came from Whedon. Penn's contribution exists invisibly. Number 1. Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, the opening fight, the interrogation of Loki, the solo push to close the portal above Manhattan, the performance that embedded the character into the MCU for 10 years. Think about how close none of it came to existing. When Johansson's availability became uncertain during pre-production, Whedon did not adjust the script around her schedule. He wrote extensive pages removing Black Widow entirely and replacing her with a completely different character, the Wasp. And he wanted Zooey Deschanel to play the role. Marvel SVP Jeremy Lacham confirmed the full scope in the story of Marvel Studios published in 2021. It was all about the Wasp. He wanted to cast Zooey Deschanel. She was the funniest character in the whole movie and well written. The Wasp draft became what Whedon described as too waspy, threatening to absorb too much of the ensemble's oxygen. When Johansson's conflict resolved, Whedon returned to Black Widow. Emily Blunt had been Jon Favreau's original first choice for the Iron Man 2 role before Fox's prior contract made her unavailable. At a 2012 DGA screening, Whedon admitted, "She's adorable. I'm just going to write her." But he recognized the balance problem in time. If Johansson's schedule had not cleared, the lineup would have featured a character audiences had never met, played by an actress known for independent comedies. The interrogation of Loki would not exist. Every Black Widow scene exists because one scheduling conflict resolved just in time. The Avengers arrived in 2012 as something never seriously attempted at this scale, and by almost every reasonable measure, it should not have worked this well. The director had one underperforming feature on his resume. The existing script was discarded. The 3D system failed on day one. The most enduring character almost did not appear at all. Every decision that now reads as inevitable, Ruffalo as Banner, Hiddleston as Loki, the shawarma scene, the circle shot, the Thanos smile, was the product of compromise and improvisation. None of it was guaranteed. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, we have a Hulk. We'll see you next time.